Fox News alert, we're less than 3 hours away from Trump's 8 p.m. deadline for Iran to make a deal or risk a whole civilization dying. So, how are the talks going? Well, moments ago, 47 telling Fox News, quote, we're in heated negotiations, end quote. And Pakistan's prime minister, who's been mediating things, is now urging Trump to extend the deadline by 2 weeks. That's 14 days, Jesse. The president is aware of that request and says he will respond. Meanwhile, here's J.D. Vance encouraging the mullahs to see the light.
If the Iranians want to exact a certain amount of pain, the United States has the ability to exact much, much greater pain. The president doesn't want to do that. I don't want to do that. The ball is in the Iranians' court. Now, we're going to get a response from the Iranians by 8 o'clock tonight. I hope they make the right response. So they've got to know we've got tools in our toolkit that we so far haven't decided to use. The President of the United States can decide to use them, and he will decide to use them if the Iranians don't change their course of conduct.
Kamala also chiming in, saying Trump is, quote, threatening to commit war crimes, which echoes these other libs.
Would those be war crimes the United States was committing?
The way this is set up, the answer to that question is straightforward. It's yes, they would be, because this is punitive.
It would be a war crime.
This is a moral crime. It is a war crime. We need to be demanding that Congress convene today, and we need to be invoking the 25th Amendment.
We have a completely unhinged president who is threatening massive war crimes against the Iranian people.
Some sort of like homicidal psychopath.
Old enough to remember the Nuremberg trial 10 years from now, we'd be doing the same kind of thing.
All right. I want to go to you first, Jesse, because I want to know, is it true that according to reports, Trump plans to launch World War III during your show to lift America's spirits?
Is the deadline 8 o'clock? I didn't notice.
Yes.
You know, the threat, I see it like, remember when Tyson said he wanted to eat Lennox Lewis's children?
Mm-hmm.
I saw it as trash talk. I didn't actually think Tyson was going to devour his children for dinner. So this is typical Trump, right? You set a deadline, you have an extreme threat, and hopefully you force the opponent to buckle. And that's what this is all about. I don't know if they're going to extend. I don't know if they're going to escalate. Nobody knows, but JD is right. It's really up to the Iranians. If they're going to wage economic warfare, we have the right to wage economic warfare. If they're going to attack the world economy, we can hit their economy. The Israelis have already hit the petrochemical camps, which they get $18 billion from, okay? And they use that to build missiles to fire at us. We've hit steel plants. Without steel, they can't rebuild the bridges that we're going to bomb. When did bombing a bridge turn into a war crime? When did that happen? Every single modern American president has bombed a bridge, almost. I think we've been sabotaging bridges since, I don't know, when bridges began to be built. When Zelensky knocked out the bridge into Crimea, the left called him a war hero. But when Trump threatens to do it, he's a war criminal? What? Zelensky's been bombing Russian power plants for 3 years. No one said anything. The Democrats are walking around with their little Ukrainian flag pins, shoveling more money at the guy. Listen, this is according to military doctrine. You go up the escalation ladder in order them to force open the strait. If it's not like one big power plant in that country. There's like 100 power plants. So a couple of them feed power to the military or the military-industrial complex, and you can take a few out. Some of the bridges, you isolate the missile cities, you cut off the capital for the rest of the country. This is standard operating procedure. They could escalate back, but this is what's done. And what's the alternative? You send in a ground assault unit? I don't think we're there yet.
You know, Dana, this reminds me of Trump reminds me of a guy at a rental car agency demanding a car, and there are no cars there. And he wants to see the manager, but the manager's dead. And so is the assistant manager. So this is from my perspective. Who is he threatening exactly when everybody's gone?
In my mind, all I could think about was my friend Brad Fritz and how mad he would be at that car rental place.
But he's like, I guess I'm trying to figure out, like,
who are you talking to?
Who are you talking to?
So I would imagine that the CIA is comfortable with whoever it is, right? There were three possible guys, one of them being the Speaker of the Parliament. I don't know who it is, but I imagine that John Ratcliffe is saying, yeah, this guy, we can talk to him. He's at least able to make decisions on behalf of his country at this point until maybe something happens to him too. I think that these deadlines become a blur and the communications becomes like, it's exhausting, right? You're following it every day, you're gearing up and you're gearing up like, oh, actually no. And so at this point, I'm with you. I don't know what's going to happen, and there's nothing I can do personally about it. I can just watch and think. And what I think right now is that what the president is trying to do is to balance the need to get the Iranian regime to back off in the strait, open it back up, and to also figure out a way to say, is this actually regime change? Do we really need to get the uranium out? What are these conditions going to be? And can you actually take them seriously? The Iranians are masters of saying, okay, sorry, give us 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay, or can we have 45 days? And then we say yes, and then we're back into this over and over again. And I think the president's trying to figure out, are we in a position to take the action we need to now so that this ends with him, right? That he said, this is going to end with me. At the same time, he is trying to make sure he doesn't want to hurt the people of Iran. Even when the tweet this morning when he said he's going to end the civilization, but God bless the Iranian people.
Yeah.
So the people are on his mind, and that's clear. It's funny to see every Democrat and lefty pundit out there talking about war crimes. It's like all of a sudden when you talk about the Jones Act, they're experts about the Jones Act. And if you want to talk about the filibuster, they know everything about the filibuster, or even the discharge petition, as we were talking about last week. The final thing I would say is, where are those pundits and the journalists and the congressmen talking about Iran suggesting that children link arms all around a power plant to prevent or to cause a major humanitarian crisis and war crime? That's exactly what Hamas did in Gaza, and now it's happening again, and they don't say anything.
No, of course. So, Harold, good to be back with you.
Glad to be with you.
Happy Easter.
Go blue.
Yeah. So I've noticed a pattern that as the threats from Trump get more bombastic, the actual bombs get more precise. And I think we are led to believe by the media that we're expecting this larger spectacle, when in fact it just gets more targeted. Does that make sense to you?
It does. I don't necessarily, first of all, it is great to be back with you. And I don't necessarily disagree with a lot of the things that Jesse and Dana have said. I differ slightly with Jesse. Just to clarify, when you're at war and you attack something in a country, it has to be a primary, the way you distinguish if you're violating some human rights thing, and I don't think Democrats should be dwelling on this, but is if there's not a military objective. Remember, Zelensky has responded to the Russians. They were bombing housing developments, residential neighborhoods, and he responded. I wish they hadn't done that, and I know we both do. But the law clearly states that if you're providing yourself or advancing a concrete military advantage, you can attack whatever you may want to attack, and we'll see if the president hopefully doesn't have to come to that. But I step back from this, and there are three things I think that I take from the president. I've never heard a president say we're going to end the civilization, but I give the president the benefit of the doubt that he really meant affecting in a really lasting way civilian life in Iran, which would hopefully bring them to the table. Three things. One, we've done great damage to Iran's military. Democrats need to acknowledge that and Republicans need to acknowledge that. But what we have not done is eliminated their ability to develop and build cheap things like drones that can attack and even help defend them. In fact, this asymmetrical world we live in now with military capabilities and military weapons is going to change the way wars are fought, and we have to address that. Two, Dana touched on it. We wouldn't be having this conversation if oil prices were not high. Oil prices, the price of a barrel of oil, a WTI crude, has doubled since this war started. This is not a Democrat issue or a Republican issue. This is something that Democrats, Republicans, and independents are having to deal with. Greg, you and I both have on dark outerwear. This is oil helped do this. Oil helped do that. So it is a part of all of our lives. And for that matter, whether you ride in a car, an electric car, or a car driven powered by fossil fuel, even this table and the color of my phone is dictated by that. Three, a fact, I think China and Russia are probably, as we sit here today, bigger beneficiaries of what's happening than others, largely because they're able to receive oil through the strait, not at the rate they were and the pace they were and the cadence they were, but they're also able to sell it as well. It was curious to me that the vice president was in Hungary today, endorsing and campaigning for Mr. Orban. which they have every right to. But I will remind all of our viewers that the only European leader to endorse Mr. Orban is Mr. Putin, and now us, which perhaps is another segment for us to deal with. I end with this. The Pakistanis are going to present, or at least the PM has said that he wants the president to delay 2 weeks. I think we've all expressed some concerns or considerations, for that matter, observations about that. What I hope we all can appreciate, and I hope the president can appreciate, is that to end this, our military, as flawless as they've been in their execution, it's going to take diplomacy to bring about a lasting solution. If the Pakistanis come tonight with a 2-week offer, I hope the president's able to ask them, what are we getting for that? When are the Iranians going to say to us they're willing to give up something? And thus far, I've not heard that. I'm not encouraging the president to bomb anyone this evening, but if the Pakistanis and others are being honest brokers, tell us what the Iranians are willing to give up. And the one thing they have to give up, in my mind, is their ability to develop nuclear weapons. We can deal with everything else but that.
All right. You know, Emily, when you saw that montage of Democrats, they were calling him crazy. Somebody called Trump a homicidal psychopath. Don't they realize that that actually helps Trump? That's exactly what he prefers to be known as when you're dealing with Iran.
And I see it as such a sad facsimile of what they should be saying about the actual homicidal maniacs, because these are the people that have been quiet about the butchering that has been taking place on 6th Avenue in this city, in other cities. You know, for Kamala, for example, to weigh in on his tweet, via tweet, when she was silent about the hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants that were going to the bathroom in bags and getting raped in historical numbers, murdered in historical numbers, the lost children. You know, I see this as such a sad, it's not a reflection of him, it's a reflection of them. And as always, they're taking him literally, but they're not taking him for the face value of what he's actually trying to do, which, to your point, that finally he says, it ends with me. This is finally the one desk in the Oval Office, or the same desk, the one president behind the Resolute desk that will actually finish this. And with all of them talking about impeachment and equating it to sort of domestic relations, ignoring the fact that this is a regime, a republic that has murdered in just the last 2 years, estimates of 30,000 people. That right now they just hanged an 18-year-old named Amir Hussein and won't return the body to his family for burial. And I'm sure none of them know his name. I'm sure all of them are ignoring, and I have yet to see them weigh in on the war crime of using the human shields of women and children around the power plants, where 1% of the country right now even has access to communication. And you're telling me that that's somehow less than the president's tweet, who finally is putting American interests first? Now, this is the same regime that flayed a CIA station chief by the inch of his skin using a small laser. The depravity of this regime, the evilness of this regime, the war crimes of this regime, and they're somehow asking us to color between the lines. This is exactly what we had to do under the Obama administration and the Biden administration, which is why our troops were in harm's way, not because of an evil enemy, but because of their own commander-in-chief that didn't have the vertebrae and didn't have the wherewithal to say, yes, protect us at any cost and all cost, except the pricelessness of the cost of human life.
All right.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.